I've never seen anything like what has just happened in Ohio. HB 6 passed, and immediately after it passed, a group called Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts filed a petition to put a referendum on the ballot to overturn the legislature's bailout. Now, the first thing that happened was that the pro-nuclear people started running a series of ads saying that basically if we repeal this bailout of the nuclear plants, the Chinese are going to take over the electric grid in Ohio. And you have to see these ads to believe it. The Ohio media, especially the Columbus Dispatch, which is very, very corporate, was appalled by these ads. All the polls show an overwhelming opposition to this bailout among Ohio voters. We're talking 70, 80, 90% opposition to this bailout. Here's where it gets really, really dangerous. The Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts put out a standard call to hire signature gatherers. And people who signed up to gather signatures to put the repeal of the bailout on the ballot immediately started getting threatening phone calls and bribery offers. And in one case, we got a report that someone who was out gathering signatures and had a clipboard of signatures was offered $2,500 to turn over the clipboard of signatures. Now, this is unheard of. And then we started to get physical violence. Now, this is fascist stuff. The people who were gathering signatures were being accosted by what they called blockers, whose job it was to intimidate signature gatherers. Well, we had a signature gatherer surrounded by 3 blockers who were intimidating the signature gatherer and preventing people from coming forward to sign the petition. Now, this I have never heard of before. This is Germany in the 1930s. I have not heard of an instance in all my years as an activist of physical assaults on signature gatherers. And there was just a major conference in Oakland, California, where people are starting to predict that in the 2020 election, there will be physical violence at the polls. This is Joe DeMare, a candidate for U.S. Senate on the green ticket, and why don't you go ahead and please tell your story.
Okay. Well, yes, I was 2016 Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate in Ohio. Got about 100,000 votes with about $10,000 budget. But I have all my life been opposed to nuclear power. And I have been involved in the fight against HB 6 from the beginning, from the time it was first introduced. In addition to bailing out the nuclear plants, it bails out 2 coal plants. One of them is actually out of the state. It's in Indiana. So Ohioans will have charges added to their utility bills to support an Indiana coal plant, which is just over the border. And the entire political spectrum was opposed to House Bill 6. Libertarians, Sierra Club, Ohio Manufacturers Association, everybody opposed it except First Energy Solutions, and businesses and local politicians that directly benefited from the bailout itself. So then when I heard there was going to be a referendum, I took leave of absence from my job as political director in order to go to work gathering the petition signatures. I had a petitioner who was stationed at the Bowling Green Library, and he called me to say he was being harassed. Tall guy, heavy set, about 6 foot something. And he was in front of the door of the library, face to face with my petition gatherer, and they were talking to him very loudly and very aggressively. When anyone would come up to us, we would attempt to talk to them. And when I was gathering, before the blockers show up, I was able to just simply say, would you like to help restore funding for wind and solar power in Ohio? Because House Bill 6 eliminates that funding. And people would stop and they'd say, did it get eliminated? And I'd say, yes, it did. I could explain what happened in the bill, explain how it got rid of energy efficiency, and 90+% of the time people would sign. Well, what the blocker was doing when we were standing there with the petitions, is he would start screaming at them as soon as they left their car in the parking lot. And he would say, "Don't sign their petition, they're working for China." And it's laughable, but I had one gentleman who came up and was looking at the petition, was thinking of signing it. The blocker started yelling, "He's working for the Chinese!" And the guy looked like he was going to haul off and hit us because he believed him. Because some percentage of people will believe propaganda because they had already been assaulted with postcards, with radio ads, with television ads, claiming that those of us opposed to House Bill 6 were agents of the Chinese government. The average person, when they're confronted with that level of harassment and yelling, they just don't want to get involved. They just want to go on by. You know, there was a lull between people going by. He said, "You can leave," he said, "but we will follow you." And then we will. And then he stopped. And we were like, "You will what? Are you threatening us?" And then he just very quietly said, "Compete." But it was clear that what he was doing was threatening us. And we were unable to gather any more petition signatures at that location at that time. That's the only blocker I personally had direct contact with because I had to leave the campaign shortly after that. But I know that some of the other people who were still working with me were confronted by as many as 3 blockers who would surround them. And I had one petitioner who, before I left, who was still working for me, he literally went to a farmer's market and he spent the entire afternoon dodging these blockers. He had to run around, he would change his clothes, he would cut down alleys, and they would chase him down the alleys, and he would have to run back around to come out in another spot. And he was not able to gather many signatures, but what would happen is if he paused in any spot long enough, they would spot him, they would call each other, they would converge on him, and they would prevent anyone from physically getting close to him. And I've heard many other stories secondhand, but Becca stayed with a lot longer than I did and had a lot more experience with blockers than I did.
Rebecca Calhoun, and I started with going to some of the hearings, and it got me really interested in what was going on and seeing how at the State House so many testimonies against this bill. So, I mean, I didn't go to all the hearings, there were a lot, but I went to enough, and it was like about 80% of the people were testifying, all this expert testimony against the bills, and I'm like, okay, this thing's got to have some pushback politically by certain senators, but it wasn't enough, and that thing passed. And I can remember that head of the Senate, he was very proud. He said, "Well, we made some changes, and I'm glad to announce that everybody in Ohio is going to pay this surtax." He was so proud of that fact that we were all going to pay it, or surcharge. It's not a tax, a surcharge. Like, okay. And one thing, when I was having my petition, so I would just say, "Hey, did you know that there's this bill passed that your rates are going to go up, and they took away all our energy efficiency programs, and they took away funding our what did you call it, our requirements that a certain amount of our electricity comes from renewable sources, and they did it, it's going to last for 10 years. They said, "How can we go on like this for 10 years without any new renewable development in Ohio?" And people were like, "What?" And so a lot of people signed it when I had a chance to. So everything was going okay, really, for me, and they were pretty pleased with my productivity until the blockers started. And I have on my phone, because day to day we'll have to report, so I have a lot of the incidents on my phone with the blockers. I would be working alone, and then they figure out you're there, and then they come and they surround you. I mean, I was surrounded sometimes by 2, sometimes by 3, sometimes by 4, and it's hard enough to have contact with the person. And then when you have that person handing out the postcards and say, "Don't give your private information to that person," it was hard enough to engage with them. And when they hear that, it's like, unless they already know about it, then they might say, I won't pay attention to you. But if they don't know about what's going on, they're like, I don't want this trouble, you know. And the libraries, I was getting worried that the libraries would not want us around, and because we were bringing trouble with us when those people were there, because people were being blocked from going on their normal path with all these me and the blockers in their way. It was like you had to go through a gauntlet to get into the library. And so I think it really did slow down my production a lot. And then I did have a bad experience at the Gahanna Library, and I really think of it like it's just they were like thugs. They really were. It was a different group. Like a lot of times they were, I don't know if they were employed from different people, but these people, they would come up to me, well, at this, they came up and they acted like they were regular people and they wanted to see what my spiel is. And then they go back to their cars and then they put on these declined to sign blue shirts. And they have little name tags and they look real official. And then they were all over, blocking me all over. And they were intimidating to me, the one guy and this girl. They would come up close and they would get real close. And then the library lady had to come out, say, you can't stand there and you have to be over. Oh, okay. And then they go up again. They were just people who needed a job, I guess.
Okay.
You know, but this group was particularly, and they seemed really rough. And then the four of them, as when it got dark, followed me to my car, and then they started taking pictures of my my license plate. And then they were all in the van, and I was like, and then they followed me out of the parking lot. And I was looking in my rearview mirror, what are they going to do to me? Are they going to try to crash my car or what? So I did not like that at all. And so the blockers, till the very end, because I stayed with the campaign till the last day. I was working part-time. But to the very end, we had blockers. And then we had the petition variety where they had the fake petitions. And then what would happen was people would say, oh, I already signed that. And they're like, well, which one did you sign? Oh, well, I don't know. I signed the thing about the energy. And then I'd say, well, did it go this way or this way? And because theirs was not a true petition and it went a different direction.
Let me explain that one real quick. So what happened in this part was, you can tell this was extremely well planned. This is very sophisticated. These blockers turned up with a petition of their own. These people not only intimidated physically signature gatherers, but they had a petition of their own. And they were asking people to multiple sign this petition. And they said they had 800,000 signatories, and nobody checked. It wasn't an official petition, so it didn't go to the AG. Nobody checked it, and we had media people saying that the pro-nuclear people had gathered 800,000 signatures. It was a total scam, but it served them multiple functions, because if they were in the vicinity of a signature gatherer for the repeal, they were asking people to sign signatures, and then the people would say, well, I already signed.
Yeah, the reports were that the fake petitions, the blockers, were getting people to sign multiple times, and
Yes.
they were being paid so much for each signature.
Yeah,
They were getting
$8.
$8 per signature, so they could get $80, and so they had almost unlimited amounts of money, almost unlimited people, almost unlimited. They had no qualms about breaking any sort of rules or being aggressive, and they literally stifled democracy. But
You had bribery account reports also.
yes, there were.
Let's hear about that, please.
Well, there were accounts that people were being offered to turn in their petitions, and most frequently what people were being offered money to do was to just quit. And they said, if you quit, this is according to a guest I had on my radio show, he said he was offered that if you quit, the blocker said, then I get a bonus. I get like $2,500. I'll split that bonus with you. And so come work for us. You'll get a bonus. You'll get $8 per signature. And people were offered, up to thousands of dollars to stop gathering HB6 referendum petitions and to go over to the thugs.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, yeah, 2 times I was offered that deal of the blocker women would come up and say, hey, you know, you want to make some money, you need to come work for us. We'll pay you $8 a signature at the end of every day. So that happened twice, and my boss said that they lost about 59 petitioners.
A lot of the petitioners stationed here in Columbus were from out of state, and they stayed at local hotels. And the thugs, the blockers, found out what hotels they were staying at and actually would approach them in the evenings. This is according to published reports, and say, you know, and offer them money for filled out petitions. And the Ohio Attorney General claimed that his quote was "knock it off." He said, you know, but as far as I know, no investigations have resulted in any kind of legal action against either the blockers, the thugs, or the company that hired.
Yeah, Mike Kovalik from Westerville, Ohio.
Great.
I'm taking an environmental class down at Columbus State. In between the parking lot and going to the building, which is probably, I don't know, 100 yards, I was probably surrounded by 10 or 12 of these people. Yeah, they were all over the place. You know, these you could just see them walking everywhere. And it was the same thing. They weren't assaulting me. They just wanted me to sign all this stuff, which is a bunch of baloney, right? I told them no. Then I just started to sign fake names, right? I figured they're going to get paid. I'll help them along with it. But they just almost were just all over the campus down there, getting everybody to sign.
There is one videotape. A woman who was working as a blocker did attack, and there was a security camera, which obviously she didn't know was there. And she attacked a signature gatherer, and he attempted to take her picture with his cell phone, and she knocked the cell phone to the ground and stomped him. She was actually charged and with a crime, and the company stepped in and reimbursed the guy for his cell phone, because this is something the country has to see.
Some of the blockers who were arrested at the University of Cincinnati because they actually got so antagonistic that campus security came and they essentially got into a big fight with campus security, and they ended up getting arrested.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Free Press. Train. Okay.
Thank you.